Are Japan's two most famous female legends actually the same person? To go back to the time when these two women ruled Japan, you have to go back to Japan's Yayoi period. The Yayoi period is roughly 300 BCE to 250 CE. During this time, Japan saw revolutions in agriculture and metalworking and a shift towards political societies. And it's in the last few decades where these two women appeared. The first is Empress Jingu. She lived from 169 to 269 CE. In another video I mentioned Empress Suiko, who ruled in the late 6th and early 7th century and is the first recorded female emperor in Japanese history. This is correct. However, Jingu's existence predates Japan's writing system by between 1 and 2 centuries. So the history on Jingu was oral stories until they were written down in 2 books of Japanese chronicles written in the early 8th century. Jingu was married to the Emperor Chuai and assumed the throne in 200 CE when he was killed by rebels, supposedly from the Korean peninsula. Jingu led an army into Korea and returned victorious 3 years later. Then she gave birth to Chuai's son. A very long pregnancy, I know, but then there have been debates on what the old translations of the books mean. Jingu supposedly received tribute from Paekje a few decades later. Jingu was featured on money in the late 19th century and on stamps in the 20th century. However, it has been suggested that her invasion of Korea, along with the disputed translation on artifacts found in Korea in the 19th century, led to Japan's annexation of Korea in the early 20th century. This has led to mixed emotions towards the Jingu legend. So while there is still no evidence of Empress Jingu, she remains remembered at 2 locations: a place in Nara that may date to the 4th century, and a shrine in Osaka that was initially built during her reign. Her son Ojin would rule for 40 years and later be deified as the famed Hachiman, the inspiration for the Minamoto clan, the first shogunal family. So what does that have to do with this woman? Queen Himiko, also called Pimiko and Pimiku, lived in Japan from about 183 to 248 CE. As I mentioned before, Japan was developing political societies at this time. In Himiko's time, there were about 100 kingdoms spread across the southern part of what Japan is today. Himiko ruled a confederation of 30 of them in a region known as Yamatai. This made her the strongest Yayoi ruler. Nara, which is near Kyoto, and northern Kyushu are given as the 2 most likely places where she reigned. This map shows the latter, which is the minority view. Himiko supposedly was an unmarried shamaness and lived a secluded life in a tower fortress with 1,000 female servants and 1 male servant. Like Jingu, stories about Himiko were handed down orally. Previously mentioned 8th century chronicles reference an unnamed queen, and one of these 2 books, the Nihon Shoki, mentions that this queen sent emissaries to the Kingdom of Wei in China in 238 CE. And here is the best known corroboration. A work written in 297 CE titled The History of the Kingdom of Wei mentions receiving emissaries from a Queen Himiko in 238 CE. Wei recognized Himiko as the Queen of Wa, the name the Chinese called Japan back then. Wei records state that she ruled Wa using magic. Per this record, Queen Himiko twice more sent emissaries to Wei in 243 and 247 CE. Himiko died in 248 CE. After her death, it would be the early 7th century before Japan again sent emissaries to China. Ironically, it was another female ruler, Empress Suiko. So why do historians speculate that these 2 women might be the same? Both women ruled in the first half of the 3rd century. Japan is a patriarchal society. Having 2 legendary female rulers at the same time is an odd coincidence. The name Himiko means sun child or sun daughter. Japan's imperial line claims descent from Amaterasu, the sun goddess. Lastly, Chinese gifts to Himiko included fine beads, bronze mirrors, and swords. Japan's imperial regalia, which are used in enthronement ceremonies, are an agate, a bronze mirror, and a sword. So were they the same person? It's fun to think about. Follow for more Japanese history.